And our first short story is Chad Skelton, who is a journalist at the Vancouver Sun as well as a teacher of data journalism. And Chad has, he recently won a Data Journalism Award in 2014 for Best Individual Portfolio. And if you know Chad, one of the things that that really marks his work to me is just the variety of things he gets out there and tries. He's the kind of journalist, he's just working at the Vancouver Sun. They don't have a big graphics department. They don't have a big interactive department. It's really just Chad, and he's trying out different tools and getting different things out there. If you take a look at some of the work he's done the busiest polling stations in a viz. He's done library checkouts, real estate, pollutants, age trends, salaries. He even did a one that I'll always remember. There was some rioting in Vancouver after the Canucks lost the Stanley Cup, I think, and he got out the next day in the paper an interactive about where all the stations were. So it's really somebody out there pushing every single day to get data as part of stories and to try out new things. So welcome, Chad.
Hi, thanks. So my name's Chad, and I want to talk to you today about BuzzFeed quizzes. So you know these ones. I'm sure that you've seen them in your Facebook feed. They started showing up sort of all the time about a couple years ago, asking you things like, which character from Superbad are you? Which Alfred Hitchcock film best describes your sex life? Which meat are you? And if you're like me, you find these quizzes a little bit annoying, not only because they're slowly eating the internet, but because every now and then, against your better judgment, you just can't help yourself and click on one, like this one. What type of chart are you? Pie chart, bar chart, scatter plot? I have to confess, I totally made this up, but now that I've made it up, I want it to exist, so if anyone here can like build it, I want to know what kind of chart I am. So what is it that makes these types of quizzes, as silly as they are, so irresistible, even to a room full of data-savvy folks like you? What do they have in common that makes them so popular? And I think it's one word: you. Around the same time that all these BuzzFeed quizzes started to devour my Facebook feed, I also started to notice something peculiar about which of my data journalism projects were generating the most traffic and buzz. They too seem to have one particular word in common. So how bad is autocrime in your area? How much does your daily commute cost? How many in your neighborhood are organ donors? And this last one will make more sense if you understand Vancouver is kind of the Seattle of Canada. How far away are you from the nearest Starbucks? And it's not just the Vancouver Sun. Everywhere I turn, it seems, news outlets want to tell me more about myself. ProPublica lets me know how long I'll wait at the emergency room and whether my doctors receive money from Big Pharma. The LA Times wants me to know how fast fire department response times are in my neighborhood and where in LA I can afford to live. These maps and charts are all forms of data storytelling, but rather than trying to tell the story of the data, they let users find their own story in the data. And just how hungry are people for data about themselves? It turns out, even when I think I've done a pretty good job of putting the you in one of my data projects, the message from our readers is often that it's not nearly personal enough. For example, last summer, teachers in British Columbia went on strike, and one of the key issues in the dispute was class composition, the challenges teachers face in instructing kids with special needs like autism. So we got data from the provincial government showing the number of special needs students in every school in the province, and we built this tool that let parents compare their kids' school to their school district and to the province. We were pretty happy with ourselves until readers wrote in saying that what they really wanted to know was not how many special needs students were in their kids' school, but how many were in their kids' class. After a couple of months of fighting with the provincial government for data, we finally launched a revised version of our chart that told readers just that. For as long as I can remember in the news business, we've been trying to figure out what readers want. We've given them telescopes, a way of bringing the world far away close to home. We've given them microscopes, a tool for peering into worlds that are usually hidden. But it turns out many of our readers just want this. Now, on the face of it, this is all profoundly depressing. Most of us in this room, journalists, activists, academics, want to be in the business of making microscopes and telescopes, not bigger and better mirrors. We want to find ways to get people to look up from their navels and see the world around them. Luckily, I think there is a way to achieve that with mirrors. I'll give you an example, and it's one that I confess actually stems from my own self-interest and narcissism. We all like to keep up with the Joneses, and for years, whenever I'd see what the median income in Canada was, about $50,000 per person, I'd feel pretty good about myself. I'm doing okay. Although I must confess that this is Canadian dollars, so you need to adjust it a little bit here. But then it occurred to me that this $50,000 figure includes high school dropouts flipping burgers and retirees living on their pensions. And then if I really want to know if I'm keeping up with the Joneses, if I'm my scorecard of life is doing pretty okay, I need to know how my income compares to people like me, those in their late 30s with a university education. So when the latest census data came out, I made this. How much money do people just like you make? And the first thing I did, of course, was look up myself. And we'll just do a quick test here. Hopefully this will work. Spinning basketball of death here. I got to enter the Wi-Fi password. I can click again? Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so median income in Canada, $50,000. But I am a man, and I am between the ages of 35 and 44 years of age, and I have a bachelor's degree or higher, and I am white. And all of a sudden, I didn't feel quite so rich. Then I started fiddling around with the tool. I wondered, I thought, what my median income would be if I was exactly the same age, same education level, but I was a woman. Or what if I was a black woman? It turned out that other people that used the tool had a similar experience to mine. Pretty much by accident, I had created a chart about income inequality. But by framing the chart as personal data, people were engaged by the material in a way they otherwise wouldn't have been. I know this because using the exact same data as that interactive chart, I made another chart showing which demographic groups in Canada had the highest and lowest incomes. And it got a tiny fraction of the traffic. Two of the best examples I've seen of using personal data to make a larger point are both about global warming, which is kind of ironic because if there was ever an issue that isn't all about you, it's man-made global climate change. The folks at Kiln made this cool little graphic for The Guardian. You plug in your year of birth and it shows you how hot the Earth will get in your lifetime. And the New Scientist built this great interactive map, Your Warming World, where you can zoom into your city and see how temperatures have risen where you live. Both tools do an elegant job of making a pretty simple point. Global warming is something that affects you. Scott Klein of ProPublica has talked about the importance of the far view and the near view in data journalism. And I think most of us have usually understood that as a way of moving readers from the general to the specific. You give folks the big picture story, and then with a little app or a map on the side, let them zoom into their own neighborhood or city. But I wonder if at least some of the time it makes sense for us to try flipping that, so that we draw readers in with what we know they care about, themselves, where they live, and then pivot to the larger issue. In short, we get readers to care about the big picture by first showing them where in that big picture they are. Which is what we did with our interactive graphic on special needs students in BC. Using Tableau's Story Points feature, we started out by letting parents look up their kids' school and their kids' class, but then we went on to show them how the overall picture for special needs students was changing across the province, including a spike in the number of students identified as autistic and a drop in the number of students being identified as gifted. And our map of organ donor rates by neighborhood led to a feature on why rates are lower in areas with large numbers of immigrants, focusing on the story of Karen Rye, a South Asian woman who had to wait 10 years for a new kidney. Now, one of the biggest challenges of putting the you in your data is that it requires a lot of data, data that in some cases may raise legitimate privacy concerns. That means if you work for an agency that has the data, convincing your boss that it's okay to share it, or if you're a journalist like me, convincing a government agency to cough it up. It's not easy. One thing I found helpful is to imagine the kind of data that everyone would agree could be a privacy problem, and then just asking for data that's one level up from that. So you ask for data on classes instead of students, crime reports by 100 block instead of addresses, or if you want to get more technical, latitude and longitude coordinates rounded to 2 decimal places instead of 5. As a journalist, there are basically 2 ways to try to get this data. You can ask nicely, or you can file a FOIA request. In my experience, it's usually best to start with the rows, but to hint ever so subtly that you've got a crowbar in the trunk. Indeed, I've become a bit of an expert over the years in writing passive-aggressive emails like this one. I'm confident this data would be releasable in response to a formal Freedom of Information request, but I'd rather not go that route, and I found most agencies are willing to comply with reasonable data requests from the Vancouver Sun. This one, by the way, got us that organ donor data. Which brings me back to quizzes. As many of you know, in 2013, the most popular story on the New York Times website wasn't a story at all, but a quiz, the dialect quiz. You answered 25 questions, and the Times told you which part of the country you were most likely from. In form, the quiz was much like those you'd find on BuzzFeed. The difference was this one was based on actual research from Harvard on how people talk. And it's not the only example of a quiz based on real data. In August, to help illustrate for readers how jury selection works, the Times launched a quiz that told you whether someone like you was likely to be seated on a jury. Among other things, the quiz revealed how having a low income or a blue-collar job made you less likely to be picked. The online quiz isn't going away anytime soon, nor is our insatiable appetite for more and better ways to look at ourselves. But I do think there are ways to harness that self-interest for the greater good, that while our readers are gazing at themselves, they might catch a glimpse of the people around them, that we can hold a mirror up to society at the same time as our readers are checking themselves out. Thanks for listening.